Hello and welcome to Esther's Gardening Adventures. I'm Esther, and the seed starting and winter sowing season has finally begun. February is when I start some of my seeds, and basically I do seed starting from here until late March, possibly early April, depending on if I find new varieties or something. So I thought I would share with you what I am starting off my season with, what I'm winter sowing, as well as what I'm starting indoors under grow lights. So winter sowing is one of several different ways to start your seeds, and it involves using milk jugs, which you put outside. You basically leave in the sun, let the elements get to it, and they basically create mini greenhouses that you put the soil and the seeds in, and you leave them. And you can, a little bit of babysitting, but pretty much ready to go. So it's starting your seeds outside instead of indoors under grow lights. So today I'm going to be doing a mixture of both, and I'll be explaining to you why I'm doing some one way and some the other way. Now I should mention, today I'm doing mostly cool weather crops. Those are crops that basically don't like the summer and do best in cool weather, and also can handle either a range of cold temperatures. Some can handle a freeze, some can handle a light frost, and some can handle a deep freeze. So it's good to pay attention to sort of how hardy your crops are. I'm going to be doing cool weather flowers, herbs, and vegetables today. So we'll see how far we get now. I didn't bring my potting mix in until recently today, maybe an hour or two ago. And some of it is still 100% frozen in chunks. So we will get as far as we can today. And I may have to film some of this and post it later in the week because, yeah. I forgot to bring the bag in. So for starters, I've prepped all the jugs, which means I have drilled holes and cut down, and I've drilled drainage holes in the bottom. You leave the cap off, and then I'm going to fill this with potting mix. So something I want to mention to you is that for winter sowing, you don't have to do any variety in any particular order. You can start with cool weather vegetables, you can start with peppers and eggplants or tomatoes, you can do anything you want in any order. I like to go in a specific order because it helps me make sure I don't forget anything. And for cool weather crops, because they're going to be the first thing I put out in the garden, I put the seedlings in the garden, they're going to be the first thing that I winter sow, as well as native plants. Now, I've actually already started some seeds indoors. Yesterday, I sowed seeds for a number of things. These are from American Tray Company by Epic Gardening. And these are basically little seed cells. I've already got calendula in here, orange calendula in here. And I'm going to fill them out. But I like them because they have these little trays that you can put that keep the liquid in, and then these that'll keep the humidity in. I've never used these before, but I got these as a Christmas gift. One cool other crop that I love to winter sow and that does really well for my area is nasturtiums. And here I'm growing cherries, jubilee, and vanilla berry. Now, what's interesting about this is one of the things I love about winter sowing is a lot of the things that the seed packets tell you to do, you don't have to do if you're winter sowing, because basically the seeds sit in moisture for an extended period of time and they don't really ever dry out if you keep up with the watering. So typically, if you're starting these indoors, you will need to do some sanding or some abrasion to break down the outer shell of nasturtiums. If you're winter sowing them, you don't have to do that, which is just really great. So I'm going to have 2 in one container and just fill up the pot here. This year I'm trying really hard not to plant too many seeds of too many varieties. I say that every year, but hopefully I'll actually be able to stick with it this year. Boy, this stuff is frozen solid. If you watch the show long enough, you know one of my tips is to have a little thing of water to rinse your hands and then dry them off between steps. I keep these yogurt containers throughout the year, and then I will cut them up and use them for labels, plant labels, and then I will also use them as container dividers. See that? When you take your container out, this will naturally divide on itself. So if you can, try to line up how you divide the 2 different varieties with that. It's okay if you don't, but sometimes I don't, and then I'm like, why didn't I do that? Because it's a natural sort of divider when you take the whole thing out of the container. All right, now you want to make sure to label both the inside and the outside of your container. So this side is the vanilla. And I think I'm only going to do 3 seeds. I'm trying to think of where I'm going to put them. I'm going to do 4 seeds. So I'm just setting them on top. Actually, oh, for the love of God. Where did those seeds go? I'm already dropping seeds, and it's the first thing I'm winter sowing. Note to self, be more careful with the seeds. Aha! We'll do 3 towards the front and 1 towards the back. And because these seeds are pretty deep, pretty wide, pretty big, I'm going to push them in enough to be fully submerged about the same depth as the seed itself. And I don't need extra stuff on top because, well, it's plenty deep. So we're good in that way. Now remember, one of the most important things is to, come on. There we go. The cherries. Now if these seeds were from 2025, I would only do 3 seeds because they're so fresh that almost all of them would be guaranteed to sprout. Push this one a bit further over. I really like the nasturtiums. Are beautiful, they're edible, and they add a nice pop of color, and they look to me almost like, they kind of remind me of like lily pads, like the leaves and the way that they sit. And I just think those colors are going to be really pretty in the garden. And today's date. Yay! First jug of the season. So I mentioned that this year I am doing some seeds starting indoors, and I'm also doing a cut flower garden, meaning I'm growing some varieties that aren't the kind you would get at the regular seed store. They're specifically hybrids they're hybridized in order to allow them to grow best for cutting. Often that means longer stems, or that they will come to flower in the first season instead of second season if there's something that is a biennial plant where the flowers are more showy. And one of the ones that I got this year is Sweet William Amazon Rose Mix. The Gardener's Workshop actually has the lady who runs the Gardener's Workshop has a cut flower garden book. And you can buy these varieties other places, but I like her pricing is pretty competitive. And it's not a lot of seeds. I did some earlier in the year and I didn't end up transplanting them, so it was a waste. But I probably have 6 to 8 seeds in here. I'm going to do 4 Sweet William plants. And Sweet William are a really neat plant. I don't know if this hybrid is biennial because I think they are assuming you're going to pick all the flowers in year 1. But Sweet William are a great sort of filler flower, in addition to some of the other things I'm growing for my cut flower garden. So I'm also doing snapdragons, sweet peas, a whole bunch of other things. But Sweet William is really great sort of filler because the flowers aren't too big. I normally do a toothpick with this, but I will be fine. I am going to do it over a container. There's 3. I am just going to do 1 seed per spot. So they're just little tiny seeds. 3, and I need just 1 more. That will leave me like 2 seeds for next year. I'll have to buy some more. Ooh, that'll leave me 4 for next year. Okay, that's fine. So, there you go. Little tiny yellow seeds, and I'm just going to push the soil over them. So one of the reasons I'm doing these indoors is because when you're winter sowing, you can't really control how fast things sprout. And usually my cool weather stuff is ready in time, but sometimes not quite fast enough for my tastes. And for a cut flower garden, it's a little bit more time sensitive to have things out right in time so you can then shift to the summer garden. So for most of my cut flower garden, rather than just my cottage garden or my front yard garden, most of those I am starting seeds indoors. So I do the same thing I do with winter sowing with these. I do a nice spray. And since I planted these other ones yesterday, might as well. And then I'm going to put these in my under grow lights on top of a heat mat to help generate some humidity in the dome and help them sprout faster. So we'll go do that in a minute. So it's been a week since I actually filmed the last set, and that's because life happens. Also, I needed to let the potting mix thaw. So today I'm going to resume with winter sowing, and I'm going to be winter sowing red Russian kale and Nero de Toscano kale. This red Russian kale seeds are pretty old, and I don't know how long, and actually I already had a tag. I don't know how long the seeds will remain viable. So the Nero de Toscano, the red Russian kale is from 21, and this is from 2020. So there's a high chance that these won't sprout in here. So for that reason, I'm using a smaller container. And if they don't sprout, it won't be the end of the world. Not that it's the end of the world ever, but, you know, it'll be okay. Also, for this kind of, for these kinds of plants, you really only need like 1 to 2 kale plants to take care of your needs. And no, none of your neighbors want kale. I went to this gardening show, this local community garden class they had. And there's a guy who was teaching about gardening in the winter, you know, things to grow. And he said, yeah, even food banks don't want your kale. I love kale, but, you know, people, it isn't their go-to green necessarily. This does have an arch in the bottom, like I mentioned before, to follow the arch. So I'm going to put the divider this way. Normally, I would advise to do like 2 to 3 per side. I'm probably going to do 6 per side just to give us a chance. So I'm just going to grab a handful of them and just sprinkle them on top. You can't really see them because the seeds are brown, but they really do camouflage in the soil. And then you just put a small layer on top. You don't need a lot. Red Russian kale. You can tell what year I started, what year I got the seeds by the fact that the seeds are colored paper envelopes. I switched to plastic envelopes 2 years ago, and I was using colorful paper envelopes before that. Still quite a few. I may end up with 8 different red Russian kale plants, and in that case, we'll just cross that bridge when the time comes. I also may end up with none for either. This is where the journal, gardening journal, comes in handy because I'm going to note in my garden journal, and I've started that this year actually, which is already coming in handy. I have started in my gardening journal to note the year of the seeds, because, for example, parsley really doesn't last more than 1 year, and already I'm seeing their seeds aren't sprouting. And my pansy chicky chicks isn't sprouting either so far, and they're from 2022. So that way, if something doesn't sprout, I'll know whether it's because it's an older seed potentially, or maybe another issue that I need to sort of do a diagnostic on. So we got these guys tucked in. I'm just gonna do the mist. So then I do a line indicating that this is 2 types in a jug. Oops, I did the line wrong. No! I hate when I do that. Okay, see? We all make mistakes. So that one's not the line. This is the line. All right, next up, I'm going to be doing Vivid Choy, Jewel Stemmed Choy, and New Red Fire Lettuce. These seeds are from, what year? 2023, so they should be fine. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3 spots. Lettuce. I think this is in a bag. Look at these lettuce seeds. 1, 2, 3. The nice thing about lettuce is it doesn't need a whole lot of space when it first gets going. You can transplant it out relatively small. There's tiny seeds, and for these guys, I'm gonna do a little bit on top. Three more lettuces I'm going to winter sow, and I'm going to do these 3 together in 1 jug, are black-seeded Simpson lettuce, which is just a great standby lettuce that produces beautiful green leaves. It's the kind of lettuce that you just harvest the outside leaves, or a cut and come again lettuce, and it doesn't turn bitter very fast when it starts getting hot. And I usually get 3 to 4 rotations of harvests from the outside leaves, so it's just a really good performer in my area. I'm also growing Pablo lettuce. This has become a new favorite of mine in the last 2 years. It's performed so well that my neighbor gardeners keep asking for seeds, so I need to replenish my stock of them at some point. But they are really awesome in that you can leave them to form a head, or you can also take the outside leaves if you want. And the part of the leaf that the sun touches is red, but then the underside of the leaves, or the inside closer to the core, will stay green where the sun hasn't touched. So it looks really cool in a salad. And the last one is a lettuce called Yedikul lettuce, Yedikule. I'm sure I'm butchering the title, the actual pronunciation of it, but it's basically a old Turkish heirloom lettuce that's supposed to be a little bit more sort of oily and have sort of a different texture than a lot of other romaine lettuces. And I've read reports by people who say they hated lettuce, but they love this lettuce. So I'm excited to try it. It's a green leaf lettuce, and if it's growing in Turkey, it can probably handle some heat if it's from there originally. So I'm looking forward to trying it this year. Okay, I've got one more cool weather veggie I'm going to winter sow today, and that is broccoletti. One thing I like about this is you don't have to worry about it going to seed, because you do want it when the flowers start developing. So it's less of a in some ways it's kind of edible even when the flowers have started to bloom, at least in my experience with it last year. One reason I like to do things that are in the brassica or cabbage, broccoli, kale family in containers is because the longer you can keep them from being exposed to the cabbage moth, the better. And when you're hardening off these guys, if you've started them indoors, they're going to be outside exposed and not covered. And the cabbage moth gets to it faster. And I will put, when I open these before I transplant them, once the seedlings have gotten to a certain size, I will actually put bridal tool over it. You can't prevent it permanently, but you can at least give the plants a little bit of a fighting chance. So I'm putting 1, 2, there's no art or science to how many seeds to put in, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'll put 1 in the middle. These are from 2022. Actually, maybe I'll put, oops. These are from 2022, so maybe I'll put a 7th in. Now, as I mentioned, I am doing some in these containers, and I'm going to do, in this one, I'm going to do sweet pea, 3 varieties of sweet pea. So I'm going to do Mermaid's Dream, watermelon, and where's the other container? There it is, and Cupani's Original. This will be my first year growing the watermelon, but the Mermaid's Dream and Cupani Original were beautiful and did really good in the garden. So this year I'm using mostly Gardener's Gold potting mix. I do like the Happy Frog types, but I have found that sometimes they can burn my seedlings, and Gardener's Gold is more affordable, and I honestly like the texture of it. I feel like it's less harsh of a texture. Pen, and I'll like put a hole in. Just a little bit in so it has a place to drop. Oh, that's Mermaid. Okay, the watermelon goes here. And you know, because I'm not winter sowing, actually I may put 2 seeds per hole, because the nice thing about doing, I mean, I love winter sowing, but one of the benefits of not doing winter sowing is that you can thin the seedlings easily, or pot them up, whereas with winter sowing, they're kind of in the location they're in until you transplant them, or until you open up the container. Fill in the hole and put a little potting mix on top. Now I do the same thing for this as I do for winter sowing, which is spray the seedlings, because you do need that adherence to the soil, regardless of whether it's winter sowing or as a seed start, indoor seed starting. Now I'm going to put it in its tray, put the lid on it, and I'll take it to my spot where I go. Oh, why is it giving me trouble? Come on. There we go. I'll take that back to the room in a minute. Straw flour and foxglove Dalmatian mix. So I'm just going to do 3 of each. Now these plants are going to get transplanted out pretty fast for the flowers, so I will not have to pot these up because they are cool weather flowers. So I will be able to just use this one container for these seedlings until I transplant them out. For the straw flower mix, this is from 2021, and it was from someone who harvested it from their garden that I shared seeds with. She even wrote a note, sorry about the chaff. Whoa, I didn't mean to get that many. Well, I won't use that many, obviously, but make a little indent. And I'm just doing like 3-ish per hole. And this is miscellaneous colors, so I don't know what colors they're going to be. Okay, and then for the foxglove, we have them in this envelope, and the seeds are pretty small. These seeds are new. They're from last year, so I do not need to do 2 per tray. I just need to do 1. So, oops, well that one ended up with 2, but that's okay. Now this kind of foxglove is supposed to be the kind that blooms year 1. There we go. And I don't think I sprayed this one. I think I was supposed to sow for some straw flowers too, but that's okay. All right, so we're going to put it in its tray, and let's take them to the grow light room. All right, so we have these going, and then I wanted to show you the calendula that I planted last week in day 1 of this, part 1 of this video, and the marigolds have all sprouted. I had the lid off, and they were looking a little saggy because they're not used to the low moisture, so I'll put that back on. And then back here, the calendula and the Sweet William that I started in the beginning of this video, which was a week ago, has already sprouted. So having it on the heat mat is helpful. And then once they're sprouted, you can take them off the heat mat. Over here, I don't know why. It could be the age of the seeds. It could be something else, but none of these have sprouted. So I'm going to try some more bachelor's buttons today, but I'm kind of considering that a loss unless something else happens with it.